Does the resolution of video games actually matter? In this video, we're going to find out. So a little while back I made a video showcasing 3 different resolutions running in Team Fortress 2 at 60 frames a second, and the whole idea of the video was to see if people actually notice a difference in quality after YouTube's quality loss and how substantial the difference actually is. But what surprised me is just how many different answers I actually got. Now, the 3 different resolutions I was comparing to one another were 720p, 1080p, and a mystery resolution which I didn't reveal in that video, just to see if people would actually notice a difference or not, but I'll reveal what that is later on in this video. So first, a few people just straight up said that 720p looks best. Okay, 1080p is just simply a higher resolution, so I don't understand that one, but you know, whatever people think. Though I guess if you are watching it on a mobile device or an old plasma screen or really any display that is itself 720p, 1080 would look worse because the pixels are being compressed, but I did ask people to make sure that they're watching this video in 1080p to actually judge the difference, so I honestly don't know why 720p is considered the best by some people. I don't know, maybe it's a joke, maybe it's not, I have no idea. Either way, it's the smallest minority that thought that 720p looked best. Now, on the other side of that, a huge number of people agree that the difference is so small and insignificant that as long as the video is at least 720p or higher, it does not matter what resolution it is. And that is basically my exact thoughts on home consoles and mobile devices. The screens are either so far away from your couch or are so small that 1080p and 720p do not have a noticeable difference at all, and the vast majority of mobile viewers said the exact same thing as well. But this is Team Fortress 2 I was testing this in. Team Fortress 2 is a PC game, and over 70% of the viewers on my TF2 videos come from PCs, not living room setups or small mobile screens. So that's where I really wanted to see the difference. Interestingly, Breath of the Wild actually has over half mobile views. Not really relevant to this video, but I just thought that the devices people watch certain videos on was interesting. So what of those on PC who actually did notice a difference? Well, it's honestly half and half, like literally 50-50 on this. 50% of them think that 1080p looks best, and the other 50% think the mystery resolution looks best. So what actually is the mystery resolution? Well, let's get to that in a second. I also asked them to guess what they thought the mystery resolution was, and here we have another 50-50. Well, almost a 50-50, maybe more like 55 to 45. So slightly over half of the people who guessed what the mystery resolution was guessed that it was either 2K or 4K and was just showing in 1080p on the video itself. They guessed this based on how smooth and clean it looked. The other half said that based on how blurry it supposedly was, it must be 360p or lower. Wait, hold on. How is that huge difference even possible? How can people be so far off? How can some of them be guessing that it's 2K or 4K, and others be guessing that it's 360p or lower? Well, let me put this in perspective. Of all the different answers that I got, the most common, by immensely far, was that 1080p and the mystery resolution were practically identical. The minor details were that 1080p looked a bit sharper but had issues with faraway objects flickering, and that the mystery resolution looked the most realistic but was slightly blurry on nearby objects. But the overall consensus is that they were practically identical in quality, and that 720p looked the worst. So let's put that in perspective. While 1080p and the mystery resolution were practically identical in quality, the whole idea was that the most realistic looking one was the mystery resolution, and the worst and choppiest looking one was 720p. Okay? So, mystery is the most realistic, 720 is the worst looking. Well, they were the same resolution. Yup, mystery resolution was 720p all along. But the difference being that mystery was running at the absolute max settings Team Fortress 2 would allow, while the other 720p and 1080p videos were running at just standard settings. Which, on my PC, granted, is also much higher than most TF2 players already, but not quite as impressive as the maximum possible settings Team Fortress 2 can allow. Simply cutting back on the resolution allowed for incredible lighting, reflections, and full anti-aliasing. So yeah, sorry if I kinda tricked you on that, but it was necessary for this experiment. But hey, go back and look at that video. I never said that the mystery resolution was higher or lower than 720p. So why do some people think that 720p on maximum settings, which for the ease of this video I'm going to be calling 720 max from now on, why do some people think that 720 max was 360p or lower, and others think it was something incredibly high like 4K? And why do half of the people prefer 720 max over 1080p and the other half prefer it the other way around? I think what it comes down to is a lot of people just assume that sharper images means higher resolution, and that in turn means better quality, which I showed here that clearly isn't the case. The 1080p video was running on my regular settings, 720 was running on TF2's highest settings. The problem is they've become accustomed to sharp edges and the jagged flickering lines. In 1080p without anti-aliasing, you can see just how small those pixels are, and you know for certain that you are on a high resolution, while 720p max removes the illusion of those sharp edges, and in turn replaces it with its own illusion. It creates an illusion that there are no pixels. It's just what it's showing you. It's showing you what the game is supposed to look like. You can't even tell that there are pixels at all. And really let that sentence sink in right there. You cannot tell that there are pixels at all. That's why so many people think it was 4K. They thought the resolution was so high that they just can't even tell that there's pixels, when in actuality, it's just smoothing the pixels out so you can't see them in the first place. That is why 720p ended up looking like 4K. But then why do some people assume that it is 360p or lower? Well, to them they say that it is blurry, and yeah, I guess it would be compared to the overly sharp and jagged edges a lot of PC users have become accustomed to, but it's only blurring those sharp edges. It's not actually taking away quality from the rest of the video. There is no reason for people to think that it looks lower resolution than 720p, because it's the same resolution. One is just running on higher graphical settings than the other. There's literally no excuse to think that 720p looks better, unless you just assume that in your mind, sharp jagged edges means higher quality. And sadly, this is why a lot of PC users always sacrifice quality for resolution, thinking that resolution makes up for a lack of quality. In their mind, if the textures alone can run at 1080p, why care that the edges are choppy and the faraway lines flicker like there's no tomorrow? But for those who look past the pixels and just look for the quality alone, of course think that 720 max is 4K, because you can't see the pixels to begin with. Heck, one guy even said that it was 8K, which 8K of itself is a stupid idea because a human with perfect vision can literally press his eye against a TV screen and not notice the difference between 8K and 7K without a large magnifying glass. Yeah, mini rant there, 8K is stupid. It's literally higher than the human eye can detect, unless you're literally pressing your eyes against a large flat screen TV. Guys, don't waste money on it. You're literally physically incapable as a human being of being able to notice the difference. Okay, I'm done. You're getting back on point. 8K is becoming a thing, and it's so stupid. So, back on point here. Which truly is better quality, 720 max or 1080p on regular settings? Well, honestly, hands down, the most realistic, as many viewers have already pointed out, is 720 max. Especially since the majority of my viewers watch my videos in 720p anyways, as there is hardly a difference unless you're right up to the TV or monitor. And it also loads much faster for people with slower internet. But, in terms of people what think looks the best, it's down to preference. So many people have become so accustomed to sharp edges that they assume that means the resolution, and in turn the quality is better. It is why I got a surprising amount of people saying that 720 max is worse by far, when it's simply not. It's objectively better than 720p in every possible way, but they still think it looked worse because they simply cannot see the pixels. And here's how we can test this to see if you're one of the people who has had the misfortune of being oversaturated with sharp, jagged edges in video games, as most do. Due to anti-aliasing being laggy, I don't blame games or the players for leaving it off. Particularly console games don't have a lot of anti-aliasing on them, and that's where people get accustomed to these sharp, jagged edges. I mean, a lot of console games, to be fair, have been getting a lot better about that recently, but that's not what we grew up with, that's not what we became accustomed to. So here's a set of pictures. Pictures A, B, and C. And I'm going to ask you to tell me which one you think looks higher resolution. You can say this in either the comments, or you can just say silently to yourself, whichever. I'm going to show you these one at a time and give you time to think. So here's A, here's B, and last here is C. So, which one looked better to you? Well, C was 720 max, as it appears in-game. A is 720 max just stretched to 1080p? So if you answered A, you were wrong. And B is 720 max. You ask, but how? It looks so much sharper. Exactly. I just took 720 max, I took that same screenshot, and artificially sharpened the edges in an image editing program. The image itself is still 720p. It's an illusion. It's the exact same resolution. But to someone who's used to the sharp, jagged lines and high resolutions, it looked higher quality, didn't it? So, there was no correct answer. They were all the exact same screenshot. Sharpening did not increase the resolution. The only screenshot that isn't 720p here is A, which is 1080p, but it was stretched from 720p. So they're all the same. They're identical. So you see how sharpness can give the illusion of higher resolution if you are one of these people? Now, I know we have become accustomed to this in console games and poorly optimized PC games, or just PCs that do not have great graphics cards to begin with. So what looks better to you is just preference and what you've become accustomed to. But for the other half that thought that 720 max looks better, then try this. Just cut your resolution from 1080p to 720 and just up your graphical settings. It will not only make the game run smoother, but it'll make it look better as well. So how could 720 max benefit the channel rather than continuing to use 1080p on regular settings? Well, the first is that half of you agree that it looks better than 1080p, and another good chunk think that it's either identical or does not matter anyway. And then another huge chunk think that it does not matter as long as it is above 720p. So recording at 720 max is in the favor, or at least does not matter to the majority of my viewers. Secondly, 720 max takes up a fraction of the memory needed to record these videos and gives me a much more stable 60 frames per second while recording, and up to 185 frames a second while playing casually. I mean, that's just insane. Third, 720 max processes and loads faster in video editing, which means shorter wait times for videos to be finished, but it gets better. YouTube and many video editors have slight quality loss with 1080p 60 frames a second, as most still use 30 frames a second as standard. So while they can handle it fine, there's a bit of quality loss when rendering 1080p at 60 frames a second, from both video editors and YouTube's own encoding. 720p 60 frames a second and 1080p 30 frames a second take up nearly identical processing and memory. Just look at old HDMI capture cards. They can do either 1080p at 30 frames a second or 720p at 60. Overall, from multiple sources, there is less quality loss after uploading a finished video. You could not see this well in the last video because it was up-converted from 720p to 1080, which causes quality loss more than anything. In fact, the real reason the video was not in 1440p like I originally said was because when I originally uploaded it in that resolution, the quality was so bad the entire point of the video was completely nullified. There was no reason. You could not tell the difference between the resolutions because the quality was so bad to begin with. So really, there you have it. Resolution does not equal quality. Quality equals quality. And I recommend that everyone at least try this. Cut back a bit on resolution for better graphical settings. Heck, for those of you who like 1080p more, you could have the best of both worlds by only slightly making graphical settings better, but only lowering it to 900p instead of 1080 or 720. So why did I do all of this? Well, first, it was very interesting to study how people see resolution in terms of quality and to see so many different views on it. But lastly, I wanted to justify why some future videos will be in 720p. I strongly feel that I could deliver much better picture quality with the final project in 720p on the highest settings than 1080p on regular settings. I already run my Wii U and Switch at 720p for the same reason, even though both can do 1080p. Well, the Switch mostly does 720p anyway, sometimes 900, but still. But hey, judge for yourself. I'm sure that you noticed this video is only 720p, and that is because this right here, this gameplay that has been playing in the background is running at 720 max. So you judge for yourself if the better encoding and highest graphical settings is better than jagged 1080p standard settings. And for those of you that thought that 720 max looked worse because the smooth edges were apparently too blurry in the video, even though 720p and 720 max were the same resolutions, just on higher settings than each other, anyway, I will cut back a bit on anti-aliasing by about half, so that nearby objects are still sharp, but far away objects are smoothed out and don't flicker. Hopefully that makes everyone happy. I have always believed that in regular settings you never need more than 720p, and this experiment here was really the final nail in the coffin for me on 1080p. If 720p can do higher settings to make a video look more clean and higher quality, it encodes better in both my video editors and YouTube itself, which You could have the best video editor in the world and you won't get past YouTube's encoding crap. And if it processes faster and takes up less memory, why would I personally ever want to use 1080p over 720? Well, unless of course I can record at 1080 max, but then there is still the issue of file sizes and rendering. So for shorter videos or just non-graphically intensive games with an art style that won't suffer too much from quality loss, or with videos that just do not require 60 FPS, I will still use 1080p, but for games like Team Fortress 2 and others like it, I see no reason why not to use 720p as my standard if I truly can get a much better picture out of it. But in the end, what have we all learned from this? Resolution does not matter nearly as much as graphics do, and 8K is fucking stupid. Good night, everybody!